I watched the color drain from my daughter-in-law's face as the loan shark read the document she thought was a deed, realizing she had just promised him collateral that I had legally locked away forever. The sound of her screaming as the mobster dragged her out the back door was the first time in 3 months that the house wasn't perfectly suffocatingly quiet. She thought I was a senile old man who wet himself. She forgot I was a master sergeant, and I know exactly how to execute a bait-and-switch under enemy fire. Before I show you the moment the trap snapped shut, hit subscribe. This is the story of the aesthetic.
The living room smelled like nothing. That was the point, of course. It didn't smell like lemon pledge or old books or the rich, dark tobacco of a pipe. It didn't smell like a home. It smelled like aesthetic. It smelled like a violently expensive candle that promised the scent of linen and void. I sat in my wheelchair, positioned expertly in the corner by the decorative pampas grass. Linda had angled me so I wouldn't ruin the sightlines from the foyer. To her, I wasn't Frank Miller, retired master sergeant and father of her husband. I was just another texture in the room that needed to be managed, a slightly wrinkled gray accessory that occasionally needed to be wiped down. "Careful with the cork, babe," Mark whispered. His voice was thin, reeking of anxiety. "Don't hit the recessed lighting." My son looked like he was about to vomit. He was sweating through his dress shirt, a shirt that was likely chosen for him by Linda to match the grayish walls. He kept darting his eyes toward the man sitting on the $8,000 boucle sofa. The man, Mr. Varga, did not fit the aesthetic.
Varga was a stain on Linda's perfect beige canvas. He wore a suit that cost less than the throw pillows, shiny at the elbows and tight across the shoulders. His shoes were scuffed, but his eyes were dead sharks. He sat with a stillness that I recognized from the jungle in '68. It was the stillness of a predator that knows the prey has nowhere to run. "I know how to open a bottle, Mark," Linda snapped, her voice tight with a manic sort of glee. "This is a celebration. Stop looking so grim." Pop. The cork flew across the room, bouncing off the polished concrete fireplace. A wisp of vapor curled from the neck of the bottle. Dom Perignon. Vintage. I knew the price tag on that bottle could have paid for my physical therapy for a month. The therapy they said we couldn't afford because the liquidity was tied up in the flip. I let my head loll to the side. I slackened my jaw, letting a small, humiliating string of saliva pool at the corner of my lip. It was a practiced maneuver, the vegetable act. It was the only defense I had left. As long as they thought my brain was as broken as my legs, I was invisible. I was safe. Linda poured the golden liquid into 3 flutes. She handed one to Mark, whose hand shook so badly the wine threatened to spill. She offered one to Varga. Varga didn't take it. He just tapped the thick manila envelope on the coffee table. "I'm driving," he said, his voice like gravel in a blender, "and I prefer to celebrate when the wire hits the account, not before." "Oh, don't be such a buzzkill," Linda laughed. It was a high, brittle sound. "The notary just left. The ink is drying. The house is yours, the debt is cleared, and we walk away with enough equity to start the firm in Scottsdale. It's done." She swirled her glass, admiring the bubbles against the oatmeal-colored curtains. She finally turned her gaze toward me. It wasn't a look of pity. It was a look of disposal, like looking at a trash bag you've finally managed to drag to the curb. "To new beginnings," she said, raising the glass toward my slumped form. "To a fresh start in Arizona. No clutter, no baggage." Mark flinched. "Linda, don't." "Don't what?" She took a step toward me, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She loomed over my chair. "He doesn't understand, Mark. Look at him. The stroke took the man. This is just the shell. We're doing the merciful thing." She leaned down, the smell of expensive champagne and heavy perfume filling my nose. "To you, Pop," she whispered, loud enough for the room to hear. "And to you finally getting the professional care facility you deserve. Somewhere with rubber sheets." She smiled. It was a shark's smile, all teeth and no warmth. It was the smile of a woman who had stripped a man of his dignity, his history, and his home, and convinced herself she was a saint for doing it. I watched her through half-lidded eyes. I saw the triumph in her face. She thought she had won. She thought the document sitting on the table, the one I had signed with a shaking, clumsy hand 10 minutes ago, was the key to her freedom.
She thought she had just traded my legacy for a clean slate with a loan shark. Inside my chest, the sergeant checked the windage. Target acquired. I swallowed. I tightened my core. I lifted my hand, the one that had been trembling with palsy for 3 months, and wiped the spit from my chin with a clean, sharp motion. Then I lifted my head. I didn't lift it slowly. I snapped it up. My neck locked into place. I opened my eyes fully, letting the haze clear, revealing the icy blue stare that had once made privates wet themselves at boot camp. The room went silent.
Linda froze, the glass halfway to her mouth. Mark stopped breathing. Even Varga, the stone-cold killer on the couch, shifted his weight, sensing the sudden change in atmospheric pressure. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I spoke with the low, resonant baritone of a man who used to give orders over the sound of mortar fire. "Did you read the addendum, Linda?" The glass slipped from her fingers. It hit the floor with a shattered chime that seemed to echo for an eternity. Champagne splashed onto her pristine beige trousers, soaking the fabric in a dark, ugly stain. She didn't notice. She was staring at me as if a corpse had just sat up in a coffin. "Pop?" Mark whispered, his voice cracking. I ignored him. My eyes were locked on hers. I saw the confusion morphing into terror. "The papers," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. "The ones you were so eager to have me sign so you could pay off your friend, Mr. Varga here. Did you actually read the text, or were you too busy matching the font to the curtains?" "You," Linda stammered, stepping back. You're lucid. I've been lucid every second of every day you've kept me in this beige hellhole," I said, gripping the armrests of my wheelchair. "I heard you throw away my wife's photos. I heard you call me a drain on resources. I heard you negotiating with a loan shark in my kitchen while you fed me pureed carrots." Varga stood up. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the papers on the table. He reached out and snatched up the document, the one Linda had thought was a standard quitclaim deed. "What is he talking about?" Varga asked. His voice wasn't casual anymore. It was lethal. "It's just the dementia," Linda shrieked, her composure shattering like the glass on the floor. "He's sundowning. Mark, get his pills. He doesn't know what he's saying." "I don't need pills, Linda," I said, "and Mr. Varga doesn't need the deed, because that piece of paper in his hand, it doesn't transfer the house to you. It doesn't transfer the house to him." Varga was reading. His eyes were scanning the legal jargon I had swapped onto the table during the chaos of the spilled water. His face, previously unreadable, twisted into a scowl of pure fury. "Revocable life estate?" Varga read aloud. He looked up at Linda, his eyes narrowing. "This says the property is held in a trust. It says the asset cannot be sold, leveraged, or transferred as long as the primary beneficiary, Frank Miller, is breathing." "No!" Linda lunged for the table, but Varga backhanded her hand away. "That's not what we printed. That's not what the notary stamped." "The notary stamped what was in front of him," I said calmly, "and I signed what was in front of me. You wanted a signature, Linda. You got one." Mark sank onto the floor, putting his head in his hands. He knew. He realized it instantly. "Oh, God," he moaned. "The money. We don't have the house." "And if you don't have the house," Varga said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream, "then you don't have my collateral." Linda turned to me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with the realization of total ruin. The arrogance was gone. The aesthetic was gone. There was only the raw, naked fear of a woman who had played a game she didn't understand against an opponent she had underestimated. "You ruin everything," she hissed, tears streaming down her face. "You old, useless—" "Careful," I interrupted, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. "I'm not visual clutter anymore, Linda. I'm the landlord, and I have a very strict policy against tenants who damage the property." I looked at Varga. "I believe you two have business to discuss. I'd appreciate it if you took it outside. I'd like to enjoy the silence." Varga looked at me, then at the useless paper, then at Linda. A slow, terrifying grin spread across his face. He checked his watch. "Mr. Miller is right,"
Vargas said, stepping toward Linda. "We have to discuss the interest rates and the late fees." As the color drained from Linda's face, matching the walls she loved so much, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Satisfaction. But the story of how I destroyed her didn't start with the champagne. It started 3 months ago, when they took my coffee mug. The war for my dignity didn't begin with a bang. It began with a slip. 3 months ago, I was a free man. I lived in my own house, a sturdy brick ranch built in the 50s, filled with the smell of sawdust, old paper, and coffee. It wasn't stylish. It was lived in. It was mine. Then came the ice patch on the front walk, the sickening crack of my femur, and the ceiling of the ambulance. The doctors called it a complex fracture with complications. They mentioned blood pressure spikes and mini-strokes, or TIAs. They used words like rehabilitation and assisted living. Mark sat by my hospital bed, weeping into his hands. My son has always been soft. I don't mean that as an insult, necessarily. He has a good heart, but he lacks a spine. He's the kind of man who apologizes when you bump into him. "Dad, you can't go back there alone," he blubbered, wiping his nose with a tissue. "The stairs, the laundry, it's too much. The doctor said the next fall could be the last one." "I'll manage, Mark," I grunted, trying to shift my weight and regretting it instantly. "I managed the Mekong Delta. I can manage a flight of stairs." "No, you can't." The voice came from the doorway. Linda stood there, scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up immediately. When she finally did, her expression was one of calculated benevolence. "Mark is right, Pop. We've talked it over. You're coming to live with us. We have the space, the guest suite on the first floor. It's perfect, accessible, modern."
She smiled. "We'll take care of you." I should have known then. I should have seen the way her eyes didn't crinkle when she smiled. I should have noticed that she was already mentally rearranging her schedule to accommodate a burden, not a father. But I was drugged, in pain and scared of dying alone on a cold floor. So I said yes. Moving day was the first skirmish. I arrived in a medical transport van. Mark wheeled me up the driveway of their house, a new build in a subdivision where every house looked like a dental office. Sharp angles, expansive glass, no trees, just decorative rocks. "Welcome home, Pop," Mark said, punching the code into the smart lock. The door swung open and I was assaulted by the beige. It was overwhelming. The walls were alabaster. The floors were bleached oak. The furniture was oatmeal. It was like walking into a cloud of depression. There was no color, no contrast. It felt like a sensory deprivation tank designed by a psychopath. "Shoes!" Linda barked from the kitchen island. Mark froze, the wheels of my chair halfway over the threshold. "Linda, he can't take his shoes off. He's in a wheelchair," Mark said weakly. "The tires, Mark," she said, walking over with a spray bottle and a microfiber cloth. She looked at my wheelchair tires with the same disgust one might look at a roadkill. "Street grit, bacteria, it ruins the finish on the micro-cement." She made us wait in the doorway for 10 minutes while she scrubbed the rubber tires of my rental wheelchair. She didn't say hello to me. She didn't ask how the ride was. She just scrubbed, muttering about visual pollution and germ vectors. This was my introduction to Linda's world. Linda wasn't just a housewife. She was, as she reminded everyone within 5 minutes of meeting them, an aesthetic consultant. She curated vibe-centric living spaces for wealthy idiots who lacked the personality to choose their own throw pillows. Her entire identity was built on the idea that life should look like a filtered Instagram post. And I was a very unfiltered object. They wheeled me to my room. It wasn't a bedroom, it was a cell. White walls, a single low platform bed with gray linens, a floating desk with nothing on it. No television, no bookshelf. "Where's the rest of it?" I asked, my voice raspy. "The rest of what?" Linda asked, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. "My things. The movers brought 20 boxes. "Oh, those," she waved a hand dismissively. "We put them in the garage for now. We need to sort them, to see what fits the energy of the home." "The energy?" I scowled.
"Linda, my wife's ashes are in one of those boxes, and we will find a respectful place for them," she said, her tone icy. "Eventually, but we can't just clutter the surfaces, Pop. Minimalist living reduces cortisol levels. You'll thank me later. A clear space is a clear mind." She closed the door. I was left alone in the white box, listening to the silence.
The first week was a lesson in hierarchy. I tried to be a part of the family. I really did. At dinner, served on square slate plates that screeched when you used a fork, I tried to talk to Mark about his job and logistics. "So, the supply chain issues easing up?" I asked, trying to cut a piece of dry, unseasoned chicken. "A little, Dad. It's mostly the—" "Mark, don't chew with your mouth open," Linda interrupted, not looking up from her phone. She was filming her water glass, literally filming a glass of water with a slice of cucumber in it. "And Pop, please try not to scrape the slate. It's imported." "It's a plate, Linda. It's meant to be scraped," I grumbled. She stopped filming. She set the phone down. "It is part of a tablescape, Pop. It is an experience. If you can't respect the objects in this house, maybe we should switch you to paper plates." Mark looked down at his lap. "Sorry, Linda." I looked at my son. He was 40 years old, and he was apologizing for eating. "You don't have to apologize to her, Mark," I said. "You're a grown man." Linda turned her gaze to me. It was cold, flat, and terrifyingly empty. "He apologizes because he respects the environment I've created, unlike some people who seem to think gratitude is optional." She stood up. "I'm going to edit this reel. Mark, clean up. Make sure you wipe the counters with the organic spray, not the chemical one." She left. Mark cleaned up in silence. He didn't look at me.
The transition from guest to furniture happened on a Tuesday, 2 weeks in. I was sitting in the living room watching the dust motes float in the shafts of light hitting the beige floor. My hip was aching. I had a headache. Linda was on the phone with a client. She was pacing back and forth wearing a headset. "No, Janice, listen to me. The terracotta is out. It's too warm. You want greige. It's sophisticated. It says, 'I have money, but I don't need to shout about it.' Yes, exactly." She stopped in front of me. She looked right at me. I opened my mouth to ask for a glass of water. My throat was parched. "Hang on, Janice," Linda said. She put her hand over the microphone. She looked at me, annoyed. "What? You're making a face." "Water," I croaked. She rolled her eyes. She walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, walked back, and put it on the table just out of my reach. "There," she said. Then she took her hand off the mic. "Sorry, Janice, the invalid needed watering. You know how it is. It's like having a very needy, very large potted plant that watches you." She laughed. "No, he can't hear you. Well, he hears, but the stroke, you know. The lights are on, but the house is empty. It's sad, really." I froze. "The stroke?" "The doctor said I had risk of a stroke. They said I had a mild TIA. They never said I was brain damaged. I was fully cognitive. I did the crossword puzzle in ink every morning before she threw away the newspaper. But Linda was selling a narrative, to her friend, to the world, and, I realized with a jolt, to herself. If I was competent, I was a person with rights, opinions, and needs. I was a father-in-law who could critique her beige prison. But if I was senile, if I was a vegetable, then I was just an object, a prop, a tax write-off. I looked at the water glass. I looked at Linda, who had turned her back to me and was laughing about color theory. I didn't reach for the water. I let my hand drop. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I stared at the blank wall with a vacant, glossy expression. Linda turned back around a few minutes later. She saw me staring at nothing. She saw the drool, spit I'd carefully allowed to gather. "See?" she said into the phone, stepping closer to me. She waved a hand in front of my face. I didn't blink. I focused on the wall. I slowed my breathing. I became the chair. "Gone," she whispered to Janice. "Totally gone. It's a blessing, honestly. He doesn't suffer, and I don't have to worry about him having an opinion on the renovation." She walked away, continuing her conversation, talking freely about money, about Mark's lack of ambition, about how much she hated her mother. She talked because she thought she was alone. In that moment, the pain in my hip faded into the background. A cold resolve settled in my gut. They wanted a vegetable? Fine. I would give them a vegetable. I would be the quietest, most harmless piece of furniture in the house. I would fade into the beige. I would let them talk. I would let them plan. I would let them think they had buried me alive. And while they ignored the old man in the corner, I would be listening. I would be recording, and I would be waiting for the moment to strike. The Trojan horse was inside the gates, and the enemy had just polished its wheels.
The erasure didn't happen all at once. If she had stormed in and burned my things in a pile, Mark might have found a backbone. Instead, Linda was a master of the slow bleed. She eroded my life by the teaspoon. It started with the coffee mug. It wasn't a valuable object. It was a chipped, stained ceramic mug that said "World's Best Dad" in faded red letters. Mark had bought it for me with his allowance money when he was 8 years old. It was ugly, it was clunky, it was the only thing I drank from for 32 years. On a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks into my sentence, I sat at the kitchen island. Linda placed a cup in front of me. It wasn't my mug. It was a gray, handleless cylinder that looked like a piece of unexploded ordnance. It was made of thick, rough stoneware. "Where is my mug?" I asked. I kept my voice low, testing the waters, not fully in vegetable mode yet because it was just breakfast. "Oh, that old thing?" Linda didn't look up from her avocado toast. "It chipped in the dishwasher. Unsanitary. Bacteria gets in the cracks. I tossed it." "You tossed it?" I felt a tightness in my chest. "Linda, Mark gave me that mug in 1994. And now Mark has bought you this lovely artisanal vessel," she said, tapping the gray clay cylinder. "It's hand-thrown clay, very grounding." I reached for the vessel. Because it had no handle and because the clay conducted heat like a radiator, it seared my fingertips. I flinched and pulled my hand back. "Careful," she said, finally glancing at me with a look of mild annoyance. "Don't drop it. That costs $40. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. Not from palsy, but from the effort it took not to sweep the $40 clay pipe bomb off the counter. I drank my coffee in silence, burning my lip. Next, it was the books. I had brought a small box of paperbacks with me. Louis L'Amour, Zane Grey, a few dog-eared histories of the Pacific Theater. They were my escape. When the beige walls felt like they were closing in, I could open a book and be on the open range. I came back from a bathroom break to find my nightstand empty. "Mark?" I called out. I was in my room, so I allowed myself to speak normally. Mark appeared in the doorway, looking guilty. He was holding a cardboard box. "Where are my books going, son?" Storage, Pop," Mark mumbled. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Linda says they collect dust. She's worried about your allergies." "I don't have allergies, Mark. I have Agent Orange exposure and a bad hip. Dust doesn't bother me." "It's just the covers, Dad," Mark sighed, looking defeated. "They're all ripped and bright yellow and orange. They clash with the serenity of the room. Linda thinks they're visually aggressive." "Visually aggressive," I repeated. "They are cowboy books, Mark. The only aggression is the gunfights." "I'm sorry, Dad. I'll get you a Kindle. It's cleaner." He walked away with my library. He never bought the Kindle, and on my nightstand, Linda placed a single heavy book bound in white linen. It was titled The Art of Stillness. It was a hollow prop book, I checked. It was literally a cardboard box glued shut to look like a book. The final blow, the one that made me decide to destroy her, came on a Tuesday. I woke up and felt the change immediately. The room felt colder, more sterile. I rolled my head to the left to look at the wall. For 45 years, I have started every morning by looking at 2 photographs. The first was of Martha. We were on the pier in Atlantic City, 1974. She was laughing, her hair blowing across her face, holding a cone of cotton candy. It was the best picture ever taken of her. It was the proof that I had once been young and loved and happy. The second was the platoon, Da Nang. 8 of us standing by a jeep, shirtless, dirty, tired, but alive. 5 of those men didn't come home. That photo was my witness. It proved I had served. It proved I was a sergeant. The wall was bare. There were no hooks, no outlines where the frames had been. The holes had been spackled over and painted. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my gut. I spun my wheelchair around. I checked the drawers. Empty. I checked the closet. Only the gray sweatsuits. I wheeled myself into the hallway. I could hear them in the kitchen.
"Mark, please." Linda's voice floated down the hall. "Stop being so sentimental. It was clutter." "It was Mom, Linda," Mark said. His voice was trembling. "And his war buddies. He asks for those pictures every morning." "He looks at the wall every morning," Linda corrected him. "He doesn't see them. He's staring into space. The frames were cheap plastic, Mark. They looked like something you'd find at a garage sale. They lowered the vibe of the entire guest suite." I stopped my wheelchair just out of sight. I held my breath. "I could have reframed them," Mark suggested weakly. "No," Linda said firmly. "The subject matter is depressing. A dead woman and a war? It's heavy energy. We are trying to manifest abundance, Mark. We can't do that with pictures of dead people staring at us." "I put them in the attic." "The attic?" Mark asked. "It's 100 degrees up there. The heat will melt the emulsion on the photos." "Then scan them," she snapped. "Digital is cleaner anyway. Look, the room looks bigger now. It breathes. He won't even notice." "He noticed the mug," Mark whispered. "He forgot about the mug 5 minutes later," Linda said. "He's a goldfish, Mark. A goldfish in a very expensive bowl. Stop projecting your guilt onto him. I'm doing this for us, for the aesthetic." I sat there in the hallway. My hands gripped the wheels of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. A goldfish. Heavy energy. She hadn't just moved my pictures, she had erased my history because it didn't match her color palette. She had decided that the memory of my wife was visual clutter. I felt a tear leak out of my left eye. I wiped it away angrily. I turned my chair around and went back into my room. I parked in the center of the emptiness. I stared at the blank beige wall where Martha used to be. If I screamed, they would sedate me. If I fought, they would put me in a home. So I did neither. I let my face go slack. I let my jaw drop. I stared at the blank wall with the empty, glassy gaze of the senile. When Linda came in an hour later with a basket of decorative dried reeds, she found me there. "See," she said to Mark, who was hovering behind her. "He's fine. He's just staring. He likes the clean lines." She placed the dried weeds on the dresser where my books used to be. "Much better," she sighed. "Much better," I repeated in my head. I closed my eyes. In the darkness of my mind, I pinned Martha's photo to the wall. I pinned the platoon right next to it. And then, right next to those, I pinned a new picture, a target. The erasure of my history was mental violence. The erasure of my wardrobe was physical. It happened on laundry day. Usually, Mark would come in, gather my basket, and return it a few hours later smelling of lavender and guilt. But this time, Linda entered. She wasn't carrying a basket. She was carrying a trash bag. She walked straight to the closet. She didn't open it. She threw it open. "Mark," she yelled over her shoulder, "bring the box, the donation box." I was sitting in my chair by the window, watching a landscaping crew meticulously arrange white pebbles in the neighbor's yard. I turned my head slowly. "What are you doing?" Mark asked, appearing in the doorway with a large cardboard box. He looked nervous. He always looked nervous now. "We are streamlining," Linda said, yanking a hanger off the rack. It was my red flannel, the heavy one. I'd bought it at a Tractor Supply store in 2005. It was broken in perfectly. Soft at the elbows, warm, smelling faintly of wood smoke no matter how many times it was washed. It was a shirt for a man who did things. She balled it up and tossed it into the trash bag. "Linda, that's his favorite shirt," Mark stammered. "It's flannel, Mark," she said, grabbing my cargo pants next. "It screams lumberjack. It's aggressive. And the buttons are loose. If one pops off and he chokes on it, liability. I don't eat buttons," I wanted to say. Instead, I let my head dip. I made a low, grumbling sound in my throat, like an old engine turning over but failing to start. "See?" Linda said, tossing the cargo pants. "He's agitated. The patterns confuse him. Too much visual noise." She stripped the closet, my blue Sunday slacks, my fishing vest with the pockets I used to hold my reading glasses, my cardigan. Everything that had texture, color, or utility was stripped away. In 5 minutes, the closet was empty, a gaping white maw. "Okay," Linda said, dusting her hands. "Bring in the replacements." Mark set down the donation box and went to the hall. He returned carrying 5 plastic-wrapped packages. Linda ripped the plastic open. She held up the new uniform. It was a sweatsuit, heather gray, no logos, no pockets, no zipper, just a pullover crew neck and matching elastic waist pants. "What is this?" Mark asked, touching the fabric. "It feels synthetic." "It's the Cloud Soft Essentials line from Target," Linda said, beaming. "I bought 7 sets, all identical." "All of them?" Mark asked. "It's a capsule wardrobe, Mark. It's minimalist. Think about it. No decision fatigue. We don't have to wonder what he wears. He doesn't have to wonder. It's always the same. It's routine. Routine is good for the memory impaired." She walked over to me. She held the gray shirt against my chest. "Look how clean that looks," she said. "It matches the throws. It matches the carpet. He won't stand out like a sore thumb anymore." She stripped me.
That is the only word for it. She didn't help me change, she stripped me. She pulled off the shirt I was wearing, a blue button-down, and tossed it into the trash bag. She maneuvered my arms into the gray synthetic sleeve. The fabric was clammy. It didn't breathe. It felt like wearing a plastic grocery bag. She pulled the elastic pants up. They were too short at the ankle. A little cropped, she noted, trendy. She stepped back to admire her work. I sat there. I looked down at myself. I looked like an inmate at a minimum security facility for the criminally boring. I looked like a cult member. "Take a picture, Mark," she said, "for the care file." Mark took out his phone. He hesitated. "He looks kind of sad, Lynn." "He looks cohesive," she corrected. "He looks like he belongs in this house now. Before, he looked like a guest. Now he's integrated." She turned me toward the mirror on the closet door. I saw myself. The strong shoulders I had built hauling crates were hidden under the shapeless gray sack. My legs, withered but still mine, were encased in cheap polyester. I looked small. I looked gray. I looked like a smudge on her perfect lens. "Much better," Linda said. "Now I'm going to take these," she kicked the trash bag of my real clothes, "to the bin. We don't want the clutter coming back in." She marched out. Mark lingered for a second. It's soft, Pop," he lied. "It'll be comfy for sleeping." Then he left, closing the door. I sat in the silence. The gray fabric scratched at my neck. I felt the heat rising in my face, not from the temperature, but from the humiliation. She had taken my identity. She had taken the clothes that said Frank Miller, man, and replaced them with clothes that said Inmate 8940. I looked at the beige wall. I looked at my gray sleeve. I looked at the gray floor. I was disappearing. That was her goal, to blend me in until I ceased to exist as a person and became just another shade of neutral. Under the gray blanket on my lap, my hand found the only thing that felt real, my own flesh. I made a fist. I squeezed. I squeezed until the tendons in my forearm popped. I squeezed until my fingernails, which she had cut short for safety, dug into the calloused skin of my palm. I felt the sharp, stinging pain. Good. The pain was real. The pain had color. The pain was red. I held the fist until I felt a warm wetness. I relaxed my hand. 4 crescent-shaped cuts bled slowly into my palm. I stared at the blood. It was bright. It was vibrant. It was the only thing in the room that wasn't gray. I wiped the blood on the inside of the gray pocketless pants. A secret stain. A mark of rebellion. I wasn't a smudge. I was a stain, and stains are impossible to get out.
The house was quiet. Too quiet. It was mid-afternoon on a Tuesday. Linda was out sourcing materials, and Mark was on a Zoom call in his office, door shut, headphones on, apologizing to a supplier. I was thirsty. My cloud-soft gray jumpsuit was making me sweat, and the small cup of water they left on my nightstand had been empty since noon. I waited for 10 minutes, listening for footsteps. Nothing. I unlocked the brakes on my chair. I moved silently. The rubber wheels, scrubbed clean by Linda, glided noiselessly over the bleached oak floors. I navigated the hallway, a gray ghost moving through a white tunnel. I reached the kitchen. The island was a vast expanse of white marble,
cold and hard. Then I saw it. Near the back door, by the recycling bins, was a pile of rejects. It was a staging area for things Linda deemed unworthy of the landfill, but too ugly for the house. Items destined for the deep bottom of the trash compactor or the donation bin. Sitting on top of a stack of old magazines was a wooden frame. I froze. I pushed my wheels forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was my shadow box. I had built that box myself in 1975. Cherry wood, stained dark. Inside, resting on black velvet, were the only things I had that truly mattered. My purple heart, my silver star, the dog tags that were still stained with the red clay of the Ashau Valley.
The glass was cracked. A spiderweb fracture ran right across the silver star, distorting the metal. I reached out. My hand shook. I touched the cracked glass. I could see where it had been dropped. The wood was chipped at the corner. "What are you doing out of your room?" The voice was sharp. I didn't jump. I just turned my head. Linda stood in the entryway of the kitchen. She was holding a sample book of fabrics. Mark was behind her, looking harried, his headset around his neck. "I was thirsty," I said. My voice was rough. Linda sighed. She walked over to the island, threw her keys down, and looked at me. Then at the shadow box in my hand. "Oh," she said, "you found it?" "You took this off my wall," I said. I didn't sound senile. I sounded like a man holding his life in his hands. "We talked about this, Mark," Linda said, turning to her husband. She didn't even address me. "I told you to put it in the garage. I put it on the counter," Mark stammered. "I was going to wrap it." "Well, it fell," Linda said. She walked over to me. She didn't ask for the box. She just reached out and took it from my hands. "Careful," I warned. "I know what it is, Pop," she interrupted. She looked at the metals with a sneer. "It's a box of violence. That's what it is."
She held it up to the light, inspecting the crack. "And it's broken now. The feng shui is shattered. You can't keep broken glass in a home. It invites bad luck." "Those are my medals," I said. The volume of my voice was rising. "I earned those. I bled for those." Linda looked at me with pity. "I know, Pop, and we honor your service, but look at it." She gestured to the pristine white kitchen. Then she pointed to the purple and gold ribbon of the Purple Heart. "The ribbon is purple and gold, Mark," she said, turning back to my son. "It clashes with the kitchen island. It's loud. It's aggressive. It disrupts the neutral palette we're trying to cultivate." "It's a Purple Heart, Linda," Mark said weakly. "It's supposed to be purple." "Well, it doesn't work here," she said. "And the velvet? It's dust-catching. It's practically a mite colony." She walked toward the tall stainless steel appliance next to the fridge, the trash compactor. "Linda, wait," Mark said. "It's broken, Mark," she snapped. "Look at the glass. It's a hazard. We can't have jagged glass around a senile man. What if he cuts himself? What if he tries to eat a shard?" She looked at me. "It's for your own safety, Pop." She opened the compactor drawer. "Don't," I said. It was a command. She paused. She looked at me. For a second, she saw the eyes of the man who had survived the jungle. But then she blinked, and she just saw a cripple in a gray sweatsuit. "It's just things, Pop," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Let it go. Release the attachment." She dropped the shadow box into the drawer. I heard it hit the bottom. Thud. She pressed the button. Whirr. Crunch. The sound was sickening. It was the sound of wood splintering and glass grinding. It was the sound of my history being chewed up by a machine designed to crush soda cans. Crunch. Snap. Mark looked away. He looked at the floor. He couldn't watch. Linda watched. She watched until the cycle finished. Then she wiped her hands on her pants as if she had just finished doing the dishes. "There," she said. "Gone. Cleared. Now we can focus on the future." She walked to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, and took a sip. "Mark, wheel him back to his room and give him some water. He looks flushed." Mark walked over to me. "Come on, Dad. I'm sorry. I'll try to find the medals later. Maybe they survived." He grabbed the handles of my wheelchair. I didn't move. I didn't scream.
I didn't cry. I sat perfectly still. Inside my chest, the heart that had been beating with anxiety and sadness for 3 months suddenly slowed down. It became a cold, steady metronome. Thump, thump, thump. The grief evaporated. The humiliation evaporated. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. They thought they were dealing with Grandpa Frank, the nice old man who did crosswords and fell on the ice. But Grandpa Frank was in the trash compactor. He died the moment that glass cracked. The man sitting in the wheelchair now wasn't a father. He wasn't a widower. He was Sergeant Miller, and he was behind enemy lines. I looked at Linda's back as she walked out of the room. I memorized the way she walked. I memorized the arrogance. "I'm ready for my nap now, Mark," I said. My voice was level, smooth, devoid of emotion. Mark looked relieved. "Okay, Dad, good. A nap is good." He wheeled me back to the beige cell. He lifted me into the bed. He pulled the gray blanket up to my chin. "Rest up, Pop," he said. He closed the door. I opened my eyes. I stared at the ceiling. Mission parameters updated, I thought. Rules of engagement, unrestricted. I wasn't going to just survive anymore. I was going to burn their world down, and I was going to do it without leaving my chair.
They call it sundowning. In the medical world, it's a symptom of dementia where confusion and agitation peak as the light fades. In Linda's house, it was my cover story. Every day at 4 p.m., I initiated the protocol. I would let my head droop to the right. I would unfocus my eyes until the room became a blur of beige shapes. I would breathe through my mouth, long, rattling exhales that sounded like a radiator dying. To Linda, I was rebooting. To Mark, I was tragic. To me, I was invisible. It was Wednesday, 2 days before the signing. The house was a hive of manic energy. Linda was staging the dining room for a private showing. She wasn't just setting the table, she was constructing a lie. "The light needs to hit the stemware, Mark," she snapped, adjusting a dimmer switch. "It needs to look expensive. We need them to feel like if they buy this house, they become better people." I was parked at the kitchen island, positioned there by Mark so he could keep an eye on me while he polished the silverware. I was perfectly still. My hands were folded in my lap under the gray blanket. My jaw was slack. Linda was pacing. She was vibrating with stress. Her phone, a massive iPhone with a marble-patterned case, sat on the island counter not 2 feet from my elbow. It had been buzzing every 10 minutes for the last hour. Bzzz. She ignored it. She was fluffing the pampas grass centerpiece. Bzzz. "God!" she shrieked, throwing a napkin onto the table. "Mark, the music stopped. Fix the Bluetooth." "I'm polishing, Lynn," Mark said, head down. "Just do it." She marched into the dining room to adjust the curtains, leaving the phone behind. The screen was lit up. She had been using it to control the Sonos sound system, so the auto lock was disabled. The screen was bright. The text was black on gray. I didn't move my head. I didn't shift my body. I simply slid my eyes to the left, the peripheral vision of a sniper. The name at the top of the thread was Varga. I focused. Varga. 3:52 p.m. "I don't care about the staging, Linda. I care about my liquidity." Varga. 3:55 p.m. "You said the flip would take 3 months. It's been 8. The interest is eating you alive." Varga. 4:05 p.m. "If I don't have the title in my hand by Friday noon, the deal changes. I don't want the house. I want the $400K plus the VIG. If you don't have it, I take it out of your husband, or I take you for a ride." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This wasn't a mortgage. This wasn't a bank loan. Banks send letters. Banks send foreclosure notices. They don't send texts threatening to take you for a ride. I watched as a new bubble appeared. Varga, 4:10 p.m. "Clock is ticking, princess. Friday, noon, or you go missing." My eyes snapped back to the front just as Linda stormed back into the kitchen. "Why is the music not on?" she hissed. She grabbed the phone off the counter. She saw the messages. I saw her face change. The boss babe mask dissolved. Underneath was the pale, trembling face of a cornered animal. She read the texts. Her hand shook so hard the phone case rattled against her rings. "Is everything okay?" Mark asked, looking up. Linda swallowed. She shoved the phone into her pocket. "Fine, it's fine. Just the
"The buyers. They're eager. They want to close fast." She looked at me. For a second, her eyes lingered. She was looking for a witness, but all she saw was a senile old man drooling on his gray shirt. "We need to get this done, Mark," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "We need him to sign. If he doesn't sign on Friday, we lose everything." "He'll sign," Mark said soothingly. "He doesn't know what day it is. He trusts us." Linda walked over to the sink. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. She was hyperventilating, trying to do it quietly. I sat there, my breathing rhythmic and shallow. I had the intel. Linda wasn't just greedy, she was underwater. She had tried to play real estate mogul with shark money. She had borrowed $400,000 from a hard money lender, Varga, to fund her aesthetic renovation business, and she had failed. Now, Varga wanted his pound of flesh. The house wasn't just an asset to her anymore, it was her life preserver, and I was the anchor. A plan began to form in the fog of my dementia. It was risky, it required precision, it required access to documents I wasn't supposed to have, but I knew something they didn't. They were rushed, they were terrified, and terrified people don't check the details. Linda turned around, a fake smile plastered on her face. "Okay, back to work. Let's make this house perfect." I let out a long, low snore. "God, he's loud," Linda muttered. "Turn up the volume, Mark. Drown him out." Mark turned up the ambient jazz. I sat in the music, smiling internally. Let them play their jazz. I was composing a funeral march. The most dangerous item in the house wasn't Varga's gun or Linda's ambition. It was a single sheet of heavy bond paper I had taped to the underside of my wheelchair seat the day I left my house. I waited until 2 a.m. The house was silent, save for the hum of the HVAC system that kept the air at a crisp, museum-quality 68 degrees. I reached under my seat. My fingers found the duct tape. I peeled it back slowly, the sound masked by the whir of the air conditioner. I pulled out the packet. 2 documents. First, the original deed to the property, not the digital copy Linda had printed off the county website, the original, the one with the embossed seal from 1984. Second, the weapon, a document titled Revocable Life Estate Trust Transfer. I had drawn it up 5 years ago when I first started having hip trouble. My lawyer, an old Vietnam buddy named Saul, had insisted on it. "It's a kill switch, Frank," he'd said. "If you ever lose capacity, or if anyone tries to liquidate your assets while you're still breathing, this document locks the property down. It becomes a trust asset, unsellable, untouchable." I had never filed it. It needed a signature and a notary stamp to be active. I smoothed the paper out on the gray blanket. The plan was simple. At the signing on Friday, I wouldn't sign their transfer papers. I would swap them. I would sign this. And once the notary stamped it, the house would be legally locked in a cage that Varga couldn't break. But I couldn't keep it under my chair. Linda had started checking the wheelchair for dust bunnies and accumulated grime. If she found the papers, she would burn them. I needed a hiding spot in plain sight, a place so repulsiveness, so antithetical to her clean girl aesthetic, that she would effectively become blind to it. I looked at the nightstand. There, sitting on the glass top, was my supply kit. The accident that took my hip had also done a number on my lower bowel function. I had a colostomy bag. It was a temporary measure, the doctors said, but to Linda it was a permanent mark of shame. She called it the situation. She refused to look at it. Next to the fresh supplies was a small cardboard box. It was the disposal box, where I put the used opaque sachets before Mark took them to the outside bin. It was currently empty, but the cardboard was stained from previous use. It had the medical hazard symbol on the side. It was ugly. It was clinical. It was gross. It was perfect. I took the legal document and the deed. I folded them into a tight, flat rectangle. I opened the disposal box. I taped the documents to the inside bottom of the box. Then I took a spare, clean colostomy bag, crumpled it up to look used, and stuffed it on top. I closed the lid. I smeared a tiny dab of chocolate pudding, saved from dinner, on the corner of the box, just enough to look like a leak. I placed the box right in the center of the nightstand, the holy grail of filth in the temple of beige. I lay back and waited. The test came the next morning. Linda stormed in at 8 a.m., clipboard in hand. She was in full panic cleaning mode. Varga's deadline was 28 hours away. "It smells in here," she announced, crinkling her nose. "It smells like old man." She began her sweep. She opened the drawers. She checked under the bed. She wiped down the windowsill. "Mark!" she yelled. "The drapes are uneven." She turned to the nightstand. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. If she opened that box, if she threw it away, the plan was dead. She reached for the water glass. She wiped the coaster. Then her eyes landed on the box. She saw the hazard symbol. She saw the crumpled brown cardboard. She saw the smudge of pudding on the corner. She physically recoiled. Her upper lip curled in a snarl of pure disgust. "Ugh!" she gagged. "Jesus, Mark!" Mark came running in. "What? What is it?" "The box." She pointed a manicured finger at it, keeping her distance as if it were radioactive. "It's leaking. It's vile. Get it out of here, or cover it. I can't look at it." I'll empty it, Lynn," Mark said, reaching for it. "No!" I groaned. I channeled every ounce of confused geriatric I had. I thrashed in the bed. I grabbed the box and hugged it to my chest like a teddy bear. "Mine," I slurred. "My medicine. Mine." "Oh my God," Linda said, turning away, hand over her mouth. "He's hugging his shit box. I'm going to be sick." "Let him keep it, Linda," Mark pleaded. "It keeps him calm. If I take it, he'll start screaming again. Do you want him screaming while the stagers are here?"
Linda looked at me, a crazy old man clutching a box of medical waste. "Fine," she snapped. "Just put a napkin over it and spray some Febreze. I can't deal with this energy right now." She marched out of the room. Mark looked at me with sad, tired eyes. "It's okay, Pop. You can keep the box. I won't take it." He patted my shoulder, then left to chase after his wife. I relaxed my grip. I looked down at the filthy cardboard box in my lap. They saw garbage. I saw a vault. The weapon was armed. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the signing. 3 a.m. The house wasn't sleeping. It was vibrating. I lay in the dark, listening to the sound of madness. It was a rhythmic, abrasive sound coming from the hallway. Scrub, scrub, scrub. Linda was cleaning. Again. She wasn't cleaning dirt. There was no dirt in this house. She was cleaning her own panic. She was scrubbing away the reality of what was coming at noon. I turned my head toward the sliver of light coming from the door cracked ajar. I saw her shadow moving back and forth. She was on her hands and knees, attacking the grout lines with a toothbrush dipped in bleach. The smell was acrid, burning the inside of my nose. "Linda, come to bed," Mark's voice whispered from the master bedroom. He sounded like a ghost. "I can't," she hissed back, not stopping the scrubbing. "There's a spot, a gray spot. It ruins the flow." "There is no spot, Lynn. You're exhausted." "I am preparing," she snapped, throwing the toothbrush into the bucket. The splash echoed in the empty house. She stood up, wiping her hands on her silk pajamas. Her phone lit up on the floor beside the bucket. She picked it up. She stared at the screen for a long time. The light from the phone cast a ghoulish blue glow on her face. Her eyes were wide, rimmed with red. Her perfect skin looked waxen. She didn't scream. She whimpered. A small, wounded sound. "What is it?" Mark asked, stepping into the hall. "Varka," she whispered. She held the phone out to him. Mark read it. I couldn't see the text, but I didn't need to. I knew the timeline. But Mark read it aloud, his voice trembling. "Noon tomorrow. Don't be late, or we take a finger. I pick which one." Mark dropped the phone. "Jesus, Linda. A finger? He's talking about me, isn't he?" "He's talking about anyone he can reach," Linda said, her voice turning from fear to cold steel. She picked up the phone. "But he won't touch us, because we're going to have the money." "How?" Mark asked. "Dad can't sign. You saw him today. He was hugging a box of shit, Linda. He's gone." Linda grabbed Mark by the shoulders. She shook him. "He doesn't need to be here, Mark. He just needs to be present. The notary is Jerry.
I went to high school with him. He owes me. He won't ask questions. She looked toward my door. I closed my eyes to slits, watching through my lashes. We wheel him in, she whispered, outlining the plan. I put the pen in his hand. I put my hand over his. I guide the signature. It's assisted signing. It happens all the time with stroke victims. Jerry stamps it. We give the paper to Varga. Varga leaves. It's fraud, Linda, Mark said. It's survival, she hissed. Do you want to keep your fingers, Mark? Do you want to keep this house? Because that old man in there doesn't need it. He doesn't know where he is. We deserve this. We earned this. She turned off the hall light. Go to sleep. We have to be up at 6. I need to steam his jumpsuit. He needs to look presentable.
They retreated to their room. The door clicked shut. The house fell silent, but the air was heavy with the impending crime. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. When I was sure they were gone, I moved. I sat up. I reached for the filthy box on the nightstand. I opened the lid. I ignored the fake colostomy bag and peeled the tape holding my documents. I took the folded revocable life estate papers out. I smoothed them flat on my lap. Then I grabbed a magazine from the stack Mark had left. Architectural Digest, of course. I began the drill. My hands were old. The skin was paper thin, spotted with age. Arthritis had swollen the knuckles, but the muscle memory was still there. It lived in the tendons, dormant since the barracks in '68, waiting for a command. Drill. The swap. I placed the magazine on my lap, representing the table. I placed a blank piece of paper on top of it. This was the deed. I hid my legal document under the gray blanket covering my legs. Action. I coughed, a silent jerking motion. My left hand swept across the table, knocking the imaginary water pitcher over. Chaos. In the same second, my right hand dropped the blank paper to the floor and slid the document from under the blanket onto the magazine. Reset.
I did it again. Cough, swipe, drop, slide. Too slow. I caught the edge of the paper on the blanket. Reset. Cough, swipe, drop, slide. Better, but the angle was off. I did it again and again and again. I practiced until my shoulders burned. I practiced until the motion was fluid, invisible, a magician's trick performed by a cripple. Smooth is fast, the drill sergeant's voice echoed in my head. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I looked at the clock. 4:15 a.m. My hands stopped shaking. The movement was locked in. I taped the document back into the box. I crumpled the fake bag back on top. I smeared the pudding to look fresh. I laid back on the pillow. Linda was worried about Varga taking a finger. She was worried about the wrong thing. She should have been worried about the hand she was planning to guide, because that hand wasn't going to sign her freedom. It was going to sign her death warrant. I closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. I just waited for the sun.
The house smelled of vanilla and lies. Linda had baked cookies. Not to eat, she didn't eat carbs, but to scent the air. It was a classic realtor trick. Bake the goods, sell the mood, she always said. The open house sign was planted in the front yard, waving cheerfully in the wind. A few unsuspecting couples were wandering through the living room, admiring the vaulted ceilings, completely unaware that a hostage negotiation was taking place in the kitchen. Mark wheeled me in. I was wearing the gray jumpsuit. It had been steamed, crisp and lifeless. I slumped in the chair, letting my head loll to the left, my mouth hanging open just enough to be repulsive. My hands were hidden under the gray fleece blanket on my lap. Under that blanket, resting against my thigh, was the revocable life estate document. I had transferred it from the colostomy box 10 minutes ago, while Mark was in the bathroom vomiting from stress. We entered the kitchen. The blinds were drawn. The cookies didn't smell strong enough to cover the scent of cheap cologne and fear. Varga was leaning against the quartz countertop. He was eating an apple he had taken from the fruit bowl. A wax apple, I realized, as he spit a chunk of styrofoam onto the floor. Plastic, he grunted, looking at Linda. Everything in this house is fake. I hope the signature isn't. It's real, Linda said. She was vibrating. Her makeup was perfect, but there was a wildness in her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Jerry is ready.
Jerry was the notary. He sat at the kitchen island, sweating through a suit that was too tight. He was a friend of Linda's from high school, a man who had clearly made a few bad turns in life and ended up stamping documents for loan sharks. "Is he," Jerry gestured to me with his stamp, "is he cognizant, Linda? He looks checked out." "He's fine, Jerry," Linda snapped. "He has good days and bad days. Today is a quiet day. He knows he's helping his family. Right, Pop?" She didn't wait for an answer. She nodded to Mark. "Wheel him to the table. Lock the brakes." Mark pushed me forward. Click, click. The brakes locked. I was trapped. Directly in front of me, on the cold marble, lay the documents, the quitclaim deed, the transfer of title, the papers that would sign my life's work over to a criminal enterprise. To my right, a large crystal pitcher filled with lemon water. Linda insisted on hydration being accessible, even during a felony. To my left, Linda. Varga walked over. He stood behind me. I could hear his breathing. It was heavy, wet. "Let's get this done," Varga said. "I have a lunch date." "Okay, Pop," Linda said. Her voice went into that high, sickeningly sweet register she used for toddlers and the senile. "We're just going to do some paperwork, just like the old days at the office, right?"
She picked up a heavy, expensive pen. "I need you to hold this," she whispered. I let my hand sit limp on the armrest. I didn't react. "Pop," she said, her voice tightening, "take the pen." I stared at the wall. "He's out of it, Lynn," Mark whispered from the corner. "Look at him. He's gone." "She is not gone," Linda hissed. She grabbed my right hand. Her skin was cold. "He is right here. He is just being stubborn." She jammed the pen into my fingers. I let it drop. It clattered onto the marble. Varga sighed. "Pick it up." Linda picked up the pen. She was breathing hard now. She grabbed my hand again, but this time she didn't just hold it. She dug her nails in. Her manicure was a coffin shape, long, squared-off acrylics. She pressed the sharp edges into the soft flesh between my thumb and forefinger. It was a calculated infliction of pain. Sharp enough to trigger a reflex, hidden enough to leave no mark. "Come on, Pop," she whispered, leaning close to my ear. "Just an autograph, like a celebrity. You want to be a celebrity, don't you?" She dug deeper. I felt the skin break. "Sign the paper," she commanded, her voice low and venomous, "or so help me God, I will put you in a home where they hose you down in the yard."
The pain was sharp. It was real. It was exactly what I needed to trigger the adrenaline. I let out a groan, a low, confused sound. "That's it," Linda said, forcing my fingers around the barrel of the pen. She covered my hand with hers, acting as the puppet master. "Just right here, on the line." She began to drag my hand toward the paper. I looked at the water pitcher. I looked at the document. I looked at Varga's smug face reflecting in the window. "Wait for it," the sergeant whispered. "Wait for the pressure." "Almost there," Linda muttered, pressing the tip of the pen to the paper. I didn't sign. I engaged the core. I prepared the cough. Now.
The pen tip touched the paper. Linda's breath was hot on my neck. "Push," she whispered. I didn't push. I convulsed. It started deep in my diaphragm, a guttural, wet rattle that sounded like a drain backing up. I threw my head forward, chin to chest, and let it rip. Hack, hack, hegah. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. It was violent, wet, and absolutely repulsing. I felt Linda flinch. Her grip on my hand loosened just a fraction, her instinct to avoid germs warring with her greed. "God, cover your mouth!" she shrieked, pulling her face back. That was the opening. I spasmed. My left arm, the weak one, flailed out in a wide, clumsy arc. It wasn't a random motion. It was a calculated strike coordinates. X-ray, Yankee, pitcher. My forearm connected with the heavy crystal pitcher. Crash! The sound was explosive. The pitcher toppled, sending a tidal wave of ice-cold, lemon-infused water cascading across the marble island. The water hit the papers instantly. It hit Linda's silk blouse. It splashed onto Varga's cheap suit pants. "No!" Linda screamed, a sound that tore through her throat. "The papers! The finish! Lemon acid etches the marble!"
She didn't grab the deed.
She grabbed a stack of linen napkins and frantically started blotting the table, prioritizing the stone over the mortgage. "You clumsy old fool," Varga shouted, jumping back and shaking his pant leg. "Watch the suit!" "Mark, towels, now!" Linda yelled, her back turned to me as she scrubbed at a puddle near the edge. It was chaos. It was loud. It was perfect. For 10 seconds, nobody was looking at Frank Miller. They were looking at the water. Execute. My right hand, still holding the pen, moved with the speed of a striking cobra. I swept my arm across the puddle. The soggy, ink-bleeding quitclaim deed slid off the edge of the smooth marble and fluttered silently to the floor, landing in the shadow of my wheelchair. In the same fluid motion, my left hand dipped under the gray blanket on my lap. I gripped the dry, crisp, revocable life estate document. Slide. I pushed it onto the table, right into the dry spot I had calculated would remain near the center. I smoothed it down. It looked identical to the other document at a glance. Heavy bond paper, legal text, signature line at the bottom. Linda was still wiping the far edge. Varga was cursing. Mark was running in with a roll of paper towels. I didn't wait for them to settle. I gripped the pen. I didn't need Linda's hand to guide me this time. I pressed the nib to the paper. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I signed my name. Not the shaky, illegible scrawl of a stroke victim. It was the sharp, jagged signature I had used on supply requisitions for 20 years. "Jerry," I wheezed, pointing at the paper with a trembling finger. "Done. Done." Jerry, the notary, looked up from his phone where he had been trying to avoid the awkwardness. He saw the paper. He saw the fresh, wet ink of the signature. He saw the chaos around him and just wanted to leave. Okay, he signed it," Jerry said, reaching for his stamp. "He did?" Linda whipped her head around, hair disheveled. "Is it wet? Did the water touch it?" "It's dry, Linda," Jerry said. "He signed it in the dry spot. Look." He didn't read the text. He didn't check the title of the document. He just saw a signature on a line. Thump! The heavy notary stamp came down. The red seal of the state embossment bit into the paper.
"There," Jerry said, blowing on the seal. "It's legal. I'm out of here. This energy is too much." Jerry capped his stamp, grabbed his bag, and practically ran for the door. Linda stopped scrubbing. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked at the table. She looked at the document lying there, pristine and stamped. She smiled. "We did it," she whispered. She looked at Varga. "We did it." I slumped back in my chair, letting the pen drop from my fingers. I closed my eyes and let out a long, low groan. "Nap," I mumbled. "Nap time." Mark walked over and picked up the soggy papers from the floor, the ones I had knocked off. He balled them up without looking at them. "I'll clean this up, Lynn. You handle the business." Linda snatched the signed document from the table. She held it like it was a winning lottery ticket. She didn't read it. She just saw the stamp. She saw the salvation. She handed it to Varga. "There you go, Mr. Varga," she said, her voice dripping with triumph. "The house is yours. The debt is clear." Varga took the paper. He smoothed his suit jacket. He smirked at me. "Pleasure doing business, Frank." He looked down at the paper to admire his new prize. I opened one eye. Wait for it. The silence that followed Jerry's departure was heavy, but to Linda it felt like relief. To me, it felt like the fuse burning down to the powder keg. Linda leaned against the wet counter, exhaling a breath she seemed to have been holding for 3 months. She was trembling, but she was smiling. It was the smile of a gambler who had bet the mortgage on red and the ball had just landed. "We did it, Mark," she whispered. "We're safe." Mark was on his knees, wiping up lemon water with a wad of paper towels. He looked up, pale and sweaty. "It's done? He took it?" "It's done," Linda said, smoothing her blouse. "Varga has the paper. The transfer is official. We can pack for Scottsdale next week." She turned to Varga, who was standing by the window, holding the document up to the light. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was squinting. "You really should get that suit cleaned, Mr. Varga," Linda chirped, her confidence returning in a rush. "I'll pay for it, of course, out of the escrow." Varga didn't answer. He flipped the page. He flipped it back. His thick eyebrows knitted together. "Linda," Varga said. His voice was different,
The gravel was gone. It was just cold, hard stone. Yes? She was already reaching for the champagne bottle on the counter, the one from the first chapter, the one she had been saving. What is this? Linda laughed. It was a nervous, tittering sound. What do you mean? It's the deed. It's the transfer. Standard quitclaim. I downloaded the template myself. This isn't a quitclaim, Varga said slowly. He lowered the paper. He looked at Linda with a mixture of confusion and dawning rage. And this isn't a transfer of title. Don't be silly, Linda said, walking over to him. It has the seal. Jerry stamped it. It says, well, I don't know the legal jargon, but it transfers the house to you as collateral. That was the deal. Read the header, Linda, Varga said, shoving the paper into her chest. Linda looked down. She blinked, her eyes trying to focus on the text through the adrenaline haze. Revocable life estate trust? She read the words haltingly and as if they were in a foreign language. Keep reading, Varga commanded. Linda's eyes scanned the paragraph below. I, Frank Miller, acting of sound mind and body, hereby activate the revocable life estate clause. The property located at 440 Maple Drive acts as a trust asset and cannot be sold, transferred, leveraged, or encumbered without the primary beneficiary's death. The color drained from Linda's face. It didn't just fade, it vanished. She went from her carefully applied bronzer to the color of the drywall behind her. What? She whispered. No, that's not what I printed. She looked at the table. She looked at the floor where Mark was picking up the soggy ball of paper, the real quitclaim deed that I had knocked off. This says, Linda's voice climbed an octave, this says the house is in a trust. It says nobody can sell it while he's alive. Exactly, Varga said. He took the paper back. It means this house is locked up tighter than a drum. It means I can't put a lien on it. It means I can't foreclose on it. It means this piece of paper is worthless to me unless, he looked at me, unless the old man dies. But he didn't sign this, Linda shrieked. She spun around to face me. He's senile. He's a vegetable. He doesn't even know his own name. He just signed where I told him to. She pointed a shaking finger at me. I was still slumped in the chair, head down. He's incompetent, she yelled at Varga. The signature is invalid. He has dementia. The notary didn't seem to think so. The seal is there. The date is there. Legally, this document is ironclad. Mark, Linda screamed, tell him your father is gone. Tell him he didn't know what he was doing. Mark stood up, holding the wet trash. He looked at me. He looked at his wife. He looked terrified. I don't know, Lynn. He signed it. I saw him. He signed a blank piece of paper I gave him, Linda cried. He swapped it. No, he couldn't have swapped it. He can't even hold a spoon. She was unraveling. The aesthetic was crumbling. The minimalist facade was cracking, revealing the desperate fraud underneath. It's a mistake, she pleaded, grabbing Varga's arm. We can fix it. We'll call Jerry back. We'll redo it. You can't redo a trust activation without a court order, Varga said, pulling his arm away. And you can't get a court order if you're in prison for fraud. It's not fraud. He's crazy. He's just an old piece of furniture. He doesn't know what he did. I decided it was time. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs, expanding my chest against the gray fabric of the jumpsuit. I lifted my head. I didn't lift it with the shaky palsy of the last 3 months. I lifted it with the mechanical precision of a tank turret traversing to a target. I locked eyes with Linda. I know exactly what I did, Linda.
The voice wasn't the raspy croak of the invalid. It was the baritone command of the sergeant. It filled the kitchen, bouncing off the hard surfaces, cutting through her panic like a razor wire. Linda froze. Her mouth hung open. "Pop?" Mark whispered. I ignored him. I kept my eyes on her. "You called me furniture," I said, my voice calm, cold, and clear.
You threw away my wife's photos. You crushed my medals in that compactor. You treated me like an expiration date that was taking too long to arrive. I reached under the blanket and pulled out the magazine I had used for practice. I set it on the table. I swapped the papers, Linda, sleight of hand. You were too busy worrying about your table finish to watch the document. She stammered, you've been faking? I've been gathering intelligence, I corrected, and I've been waiting for you to make a mistake. I looked at the document in Varga's hand. The ink is fresh, Linda, and I believe the notary just stamped it. That house is mine. It will always be mine, and as long as I am breathing, you can't sell a single brick of it to pay your debts. I turned my gaze to Varga. He was looking at me with a strange expression, not anger, respect, the respect of one predator recognizing another. Mr. Varga, I said politely, it seems my daughter-in-law has promised you collateral she does not possess. I believe that puts her in breach of contract. Varga looked at the paper. He looked at Linda. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. It certainly does, Frank, Varga said. It certainly does.
The kitchen was silent, save for the hum of the sub-zero refrigerator and the ragged, terrified breathing of my daughter-in-law. Varga stared at the document in his hand. He ran his thumb over the notary seal, feeling the ridges of the embossed paper. He was a businessman, in his own dark way. He understood leverage, and he understood when a door had been slammed shut and locked from the inside. Well, Varga said, his voice terrifyingly conversational, this is a problem. It's not, Linda pleaded, her hands gripping the edge of the quartz island so hard her acrylic nails threatened to snap. We can fix it. I can get power of attorney. We can go to court. Court takes years, Linda, Varga said, folding the document neatly and sliding it into his breast pocket. And lawyers cost money. Money you don't have. Money you gave to your contractor to build, what was it, a Zen garden? He shook his head slowly. My investors don't like Zen gardens. They like returns. I'll pay you back, Linda cried. Tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through her perfect foundation. We have savings. Mark has a 401k. Mark's 401k wouldn't cover the vigorish for a month, I said. My voice was steady. I was sitting upright, hands resting on the wheels of my chair. I wasn't playing the invalid anymore. I was the presiding judge. Varga looked at me. He nodded, a small gesture of acknowledgement between men who understood the brutality of consequences. The sergeant is right, Varga said. He checked his watch, a heavy gold Rolex that looked too big for his wrist. The house is off the table. That means I have zero collateral on a $400,000 loan that is currently 30 days delinquent. He turned his body fully toward Linda. The air in the room changed. It went from heavy to suffocating. Varga wasn't looking at a business partner anymore. He was looking at an asset. Ms. Linda, Varga said softly, you sold me a bill of goods. You promised me a quick flip. You promised me a senile old man. You delivered neither. He took a step toward her. Linda backed up until she hit the refrigerator. We have to discuss the interest rates, Varga said, and since you can't pay with the house, we're going to have to work out a payment plan. Alternative methods. Linda looked at Mark. Mark, do something. Call the police. Mark sat on the floor, holding the wet ball of paper towels. He looked up at Varga, then at his wife. He looked at the man who had threatened to cut off his finger. Mark didn't move. He didn't speak. He looked down at the floor, cowed by a lifetime of weakness and the sudden, crushing realization that his wife was a criminal who had tried to sell his father. Mark! Linda screamed. He can't hear you, Linda, I said. He's part of the furniture now. Varga reached out and took Linda by the elbow. It wasn't a violent grab. It was the firm, guiding grip of an escort. But when Linda tried to pull away, his fingers tightened like a vice. We're going for a ride, Varga said. We need to go over the numbers, in person. No, Linda whimpered. I can't leave. I have a client call at 2. You're fully booked today, Linda, Varga said. He pulled her toward the back door. Linda dug her heels in.
her expensive loafers sliding on the hardwood she loved so much. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading, desperate. "Pop," she begged, "please, tell him to stop." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had thrown away my memories, who had treated me like a stain, who had crushed my purple heart in a trash compactor because the color clashed with her kitchen. I didn't smile, I didn't frown. I just looked at her with the blank indifference of a wall. "I'm sorry, Linda," I said. "I'm having trouble processing. Too much visual clutter." Varga laughed, a dry, barking sound. He opened the back door. The heat of the afternoon rushed in. "Let's go, Princess," Varga said. He pulled her through the threshold. Linda let out one last sob, her name for Mark dying in her throat as the door clicked shut behind them. I watched through the window as Varga guided her into the back seat of a black SUV idling in the driveway. She didn't fight. She looked small. She looked gray. The car drove away, disappearing down the manicured street of the subdivision. The kitchen was quiet. Mark was still sitting on the floor. He was weeping silently, his shoulders shaking. "She's gone, Dad," he whispered. "He took her. She made a deal, son," I said. "She's just paying the bill." I unlocked my brakes. I spun the chair around. I wheeled myself past my weeping son, past the marble island, past the spot where the water had dried. I went to the refrigerator. I opened the door. The light was bright, illuminating rows of organic kale juice, oat milk, and sparkling water. But way in the back, behind the aesthetic beverages, there was a six-pack of beer, cheap domestic lager. Mark must have hidden it there for himself, a tiny act of rebellion against the regime. I reached in. The can was cold against my palm. I pulled it out. I wheeled myself to the center of the kitchen, Linda's perfect, white, soulless kitchen. I looked at the can. I thought about the coffee mug she broke. I thought about the photos in the attic. I thought about the gray jumpsuit I was wearing. I hooked my finger under the tab. Crack. Hiss. The sound was sharp and loud. It echoed off the vaulted ceilings, a gunshot of carbonation in the sanctuary of silence. I took a long, deep pull. It tasted like freedom. It tasted like victory. Mark looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "What do we do now, Dad? The house, it's so empty." I took another sip. I looked around the room. I looked at the white walls, the beige curtains, the oatmeal floors. It was a blank canvas, and I was the only one holding the brush. "It is empty," I agreed, resting the cold beer on the arm of my wheelchair. I looked at the spot where Linda had stood, imagining the chaos that was about to unfold in her life. "This room needs some color," I said, my voice low and satisfied. "Maybe red."